Hello loves, and welcome to the beginning of spooky season. So October is finally here, and this is the season in which I thrive because I am a horror reader. Today I'm going to be giving you a list of some of the best horror books that I have read in the past year. I have another video last year if you want some other spooky recs, but these are just the ones I've read within the last year. Let's get started. First book on this list is Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zhang by Kylie Lee Baker. This is a horror novel about a woman who has witnessed the horrific death of one of her family members, and at the time, it's COVID, and she is a crime scene cleaner, so she starts to notice that some of these deaths that she's cleaning up for have a little bit of a pattern to them. So she is like trying to bring attention to that while also dealing with the death of her family member who might be haunting her as a ghost. There's so much going on in this book, and you would think that would make it like disjointed and confusing, but it is just so shocking, so absorbing, and doesn't let up. I really liked Bat Eater, and I hope you will too. Next, we have one of the books that was my most anticipated of 2025, and it did not disappoint me. Blood on Her Tongue by Joanna Van Veen. This is about two sisters, one of whom has taken ill, and the other sister comes to hang out with her, but the source of the ill sister's sickness is maybe a little mysterious, maybe a little gross. Also, people are keeping secrets. This is gothic horror, but queer gothic horror, but also good for her horror, which are all things I love in a horror novel. And this cover is stunning. It has these super cool sprayed edges in the edition that I got. And Joanna Van Veen has really become a favorite author of mine. So if you like a queer gothic horror, I recommend Blood on Her Tongue. If you want a short, quick horror, I can recommend Come Closer by Sarah Grant. This is about a woman who thinks she may be becoming possessed by a demon because she is doing things that are just so out of type, so out of her personality, that she thinks that the only explanation can be that she's become possessed. It just follows her descent into either possession or madness, whichever you prefer. It is a little abrasive in some of the language that it uses, but I think it does have a point to it because you are following someone who is maybe kind of possessed by a demon. So I really enjoyed this, and it's a little short book at like 200-ish pages, I think. The next book that I would recommend is Confessions by Kanae Minato. This had been on my TBR for a while, and I finally read it during Escape the Readathon in May. And when I tell you that I put the audiobook on and did not want to stop it because I was just jaw dropped, enraptured by what was going on here. It's about a school teacher whose daughter has recently died, and on the last day of school she goes to her classroom and is like, I know that people in this room were responsible for my daughter's death, and I will get my revenge on those people. The way she gets revenge, the way that those people's lives unravel after this, was just so shocking and so interesting to read. So definitely recommend Confessions. Oh my god. The next book I have to mention on behalf of my friend Travis, Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews. The number of people that Travis has convinced to read this book and the amount of those people who have consequently gone on to give it 5 stars is astronomical. I think during Sunrise on the Readathon there were at least 30 people who ended up reading this book, mostly because of Travis. So Don't Let the Forest In is a YA horror. So if you aren't ready for full gore, you're not really prepared for more of an adult horror, this might be a good entry point for you. In this book, you are at a private school with 2 friends. One who likes writing these horror fantasy fairy tales, and the other who draws them. And they have a really complicated dynamic going on. One of the characters is trying to come to terms with potentially being asexual, so you have all this teenage angst going on. But then also the monsters that are being drawn are coming to life. So the 2 boys are trying to protect their school from these monsters. And just the writing in this book is impeccable. I am so excited to read more of C.G. Drew's work because it has just a beautiful way of describing the most grotesque things, and I'm obsessed with that. So definitely recommend Don't Let the Forest In. Next book, another short one, Guillotine by Delilah S. Dawson. This is more if you're a thriller person, you like your horror a little more grounded in reality, and you like an Eat the Rich story. So this is about a woman who really wants to get into the fashion industry. So she starts dating the grandson of this like fashion magazine mogul. She finagles her way into being invited to their private island for the weekend, and unfortunately for her, this is the same weekend that the servants of this rich-ass family have decided they fucking had it. So she is trying to survive on this island where the rich family is getting exactly what they deserve. So gripping. Again, another audiobook I put on and did not pause until it was done because I was so absorbed in what was going on the whole time. So, Guillotine by Delilah S. Dawson. Highly recommend. Next book is Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. This one I was a little nervous about going in because the narrator is a child and I don't always vibe with that, and the fact that this is on the list despite this speaks volumes. This is about 4 or 5-year-old girl who has a other mother living in her closet, and obviously it's a little common for kids to have imaginary friends, to think the boogeyman is in their closet, except no, her parents end up being able to see this monster too. So this family is trying to shield their daughter from the most horrific thing that is happening, in that the monster in her closet is real. Well, also, this little girl is the one who's been seeing this the whole time. So it is such an interesting novel about how difficult it is to protect the innocence of your children. Despite it being about a child, there was enough horror in here to keep my interest and to make it onto my best horror of the last year. So that speaks volumes. You should definitely read this one. Kane Minato makes it onto the list a second time because I was so absorbed by Confessions that I had to read Penance as well. And Penance also made it onto this list. So this is a bit more on the thriller side than the horror side, but I still think it fits on this list. This is about a group of women who, when they were children, a strange man approached them and was like, I need one of you girls to help me. And one of the friends trotted off along to help him and was killed. But none of the other friends can remember this guy's face. So you jump forward to their adulthood and get each of their POVs on how the guilt of letting their friend run off with this random guy, of the confusion as to how they weren't the one picked, and all of this stuff has impacted every aspect of their adult life. And then at the same time, each of them has received a letter accusing them of knowing too much and blaming them for what happened. So you get their POVs, and then the last POV you get is the person who sent that letter, and I was riveted the whole time. Like, it is such a devastating thing to have experienced one of your friends being killed that you, as a child, aren't really responsible for, but do feel responsible for, and just so interesting. It's fairly short. I don't think there's a wasted page in it, so definitely recommend Penance. Next book is Strange Pictures by Yuketsu. This book is like 4 different parts that are mysteries surrounding drawings, but then there are also kind of all interconnected. The first part is about this guy who is like blogging his wife's pregnancy, and then the wife dies, and all that's left behind to like the mystery of what happened is these set of photographs. So you're trying to piece together from the photographs what the hell happened to his wife. And you have like the next one where a child has gone missing and they're analyzing one of the kids' drawings to figure out what happened, and just so much fun to read, particularly with other people, and try and piece together what you think is happening. I think the end definitely lived up a bit more to the horror than Strange Houses did, which is why this one's on the list, not that one. I had so much fun reading this while also having like a little bit of a scary horror time. So definitely recommend Strange Pictures. Next book is another one I read during Escape the Readathon. That's when I did a lot of my good horror reading. So this one was The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay, which I know is a bit dated of a wreck at this point, but I just read it, so maybe you haven't either. This is about a family who's like staying in a cabin, and then some people knock on the door and they're like, the end of the world is coming unless one of you dies. So they are basically held hostage by these people who think the apocalypse will happen. So gripping. Again, another one I listened to in one sitting. It's truly a testament to a book when it can hold my attention for the like 3 to 6 hours that it would take me to get through it. So definitely recommend it. Definitely don't look too far into it. It is one that has a bit of an ambiguous ending. If you're not someone who likes that, this is one you'll skip. But I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed this, considering how like hyped it was. So good time. Next is The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. This book is about a woman who's like in university and her mom starts dating a new man and she becomes absolutely obsessed with the idea of eating his eyeballs. Wild as a concept. A little bit of an examination of like cultural expectations, of growing into your adulthood and reckoning with your family's history, but also she wants to eat his fucking eyeballs. I was so interested by this, and honestly, not gonna be for everyone, but I enjoyed it. Next is one of the books that I read towards the very end of last year, and honestly should have made it onto my best books of the year if I hadn't filmed that video before the actual end of the year. The Haar by David Sodergren. This is about this old woman who lives in this lovely neighborhood, and then some developers come around and they're like, can we buy your land? She says no, and all her neighbors say no, except then they kind of get forced out, and she is the last man standing in this neighborhood that she's not going to sell her land to developers. They're not going to knock over her house that she has lived in for years. And then also she may be trying to bring her husband back from the dead. And you have the horror elements that is these developers being dicks, but also this like really fucked up gross body horror of her trying to bring her husband back, which he like died at sea. So wild. Oh my god, I was so enwrapped by this, and then the acknowledgements at the end had me crying. So an emotional roller coaster of a book that I would definitely recommend. The next book is probably gonna make it into my best of the year overall. Wake Up and Open Your Eyes by Clay McLeod Chapman. This is a horror novel about the alt-right pipeline. The book starts out with this guy going to his family's house because something's weird going on, and he gets attacked by his own mother, who seems to be kind of in a zombie-like state because of Fox News. And then part 2, you see how the different members of this guy's family have descended into basically far-right thinking. You have the father who watches a lot of Fox News, you have the mother who's like in the crunchy Instagram pipeline, the teen son who's in like incel communities, and then the son who's just like watching kids content. This was one, just good horror, like gripping, horrifying. Also, I love a horror with a social commentary, and this was definitely social commentary on the far-right pipeline, how radicalization works through the internet, and how that will change depending on which demographic you fall into. So, such a well-executed novel to me in a topic that I find really interesting, and just also a gripping horror. So, Wake Up and Open Your Eyes, one of my top of the year, and a horror book I'd recommend. And the last horror rec that I have for you today is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. This is heavier book than I thought it was. Okay, so this is a book about pregnancy that I liked. Clearly it's an exception. This is about a teenage girl who finds herself pregnant, and her parents ship her off to this like house for wayward girls with all these other teen moms. And these girls are so mistreated at this house that they end up turning to witchcraft just to make their lives even slightly bearable. It goes awry for them. I was not expecting to like this, but also it's really interesting because a lot of the horror elements of this book come less from the magic and more from how these girls are treated by those who are supposed to be caring for them and also the medical system. And there is an afterword at the end where Grady Hendrix explains that he has members of his family who have gone through this experience before. So while the concern is what the fuck does a man know about teen pregnancy and how that was treated in the 70s, I think that it was executed so well, and I did end up really enjoying it despite the fact that it's about pregnancy. So that is my last horror rec for you this year. So let me know in the comments down below what the best horror book you've read in the last year or so was, or leave the disco ball emoji for like this book taking place in the 70s and I feel like having a little disco party. If you enjoyed, like and consider subscribing so you don't miss any of my future videos. There are links in the description to my Instagram and my Goodreads if you want to follow me some other places. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.